Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. Welcome to Conversations with Calvin, We the Species. Chronologically, it's May 27th. It's Thursday, right before Memorial Day weekend. Sometimes in this world of taping, we don't know when things get up on YouTube, but it should be shortly. And I'm with Timothy, in parenthesis, Tim AMATULLI. And got to do a little bit of a monologue how Tim came into my world. It's kind of interesting. A couple of weeks ago, I got a message from a dear friend of mine, Keith Armenitis, whom I interviewed for Conversations with Calvin a couple of months ago. Keith is a million things. Yes, he's a dear friend. Yes, he's a Rutgers graduate. It is what it is, Tim. And he's IT, he was a comedian, he was an actor, he was a million. Keith is a million things, and he's also a wonderful filmmaker. And I had interviewed Keith several times for this channel, for my cable TV talk show, pre-pandemic, and also for njdiscover.com. Tim is just a great guy. And he said to me, Calvin, here's a link. You need to watch this short film by a young, amazing filmmaker, Timothy AMATULLI, and it was called A Quiet Pain. And literally within a few minutes after getting that message from Keith, because I have this great respect for him, I watched it, and it was like, oh wow. And then I needed to watch it again right away because I want stuff to sink in. And then I asked Keith to make the introductions to Tim and I. And we Zoomed last week, and we Zoomed for a long time. I have this great respect, admiration, fascination, and only wish I could do that kind of thing, what you do, to make film. And the other amazing thing about Tim and the bonding was Tim knows all about Casablanca, and which is the movie that changed my entire life around. So we're gonna jump, because Tim's a young guy, a recent graduate from Fairfield. He'll tell you all about that. But he's a young guy, and yet there's so much to him, and it's really fascinating stuff. And I'm one of my other preoccupations is with Gen Z, your generation, how important it is to interact. And actually, we're planning a panel with a bunch of Gen Z. We'll talk about that. But anyway, the last thing I want to do, which I've been doing lately, is a very short commercial. Not a commercial in the commercial sense, but I do want to ask everybody who's watching this to do me a favor. Just click subscribe, and subscribe to the channel, because it's how we grow, and I guess how we get measured out there in the world. So please hit subscribe. And the other thing I want to do real fast, because it's a sense of loyalty. I've recently interviewed 3 interesting authors. I didn't plan it that way. These are the things that happen. And I wanted just to show their books. First is Manners Will Take You Where Brains and Money Won't, by Donald G. James. Just interviewed Donald. Donald is a 35-year veteran of NASA. And wow, could he tell stories, Tim? Might be boy, could he tell stories. And this is just a great book about how your generation should conduct themselves. The next, you'll get a kick out of this. I interviewed Wajid Hassan, who came from Pakistan to England to America, and then did stand-up comedy for 20 years in LA, and some voiceovers and some acting, and then drifted into mysticism and healing and UFOs. And what an interesting, and so he wrote The Struggle for World Sanity, And that's also up on Conversations with Calvin. And then the other day, I interviewed one of the most delightful persons, Casey Weishi, who at 50 years old, give or take, wrote her first book, but it's a children's book, I'm the Boss of Me, and it's thoroughly, totally delightful. And all the interviews are up there, and go watch. And that's it. Monologue done. By the way, I've been looking forward to this mainly because you like Casablanca. So, without further ado, Tim, how about doing a little bit of background, a little bio of yourself? And what really intrigues me is, and we didn't talk about it a lot, you grew up in part in Japan. So take it away.
Yeah, I did certainly. I think that influence shows in the film that you watched. But first and foremost, thank you for having me on. I appreciate all that you do for everybody with this channel and with your reach. It's really great, and you're a very nice and giving person. So I greatly appreciate you being able to speak with me and let me discuss some things that really fascinate me. So it makes me feel really great. Yeah, so I'm a filmmaker originally from New Jersey, now living in New York. Graduate from Fairfield University and currently enrolled in Columbia University's Film and Media Studies master's program. I've been making films since I was a child, but kind of didn't really realize it. It was, doing video projects for school and everything, and then kind of realizing I had a knack for it and that it kind of came naturally. And I started getting more obsessed with, different film universes and starting to study the craft more and more. And then after taking some summer courses, I decided to commit myself to that for college. Didn't want to go to a film school initially in case it didn't work out, which is why I chose Fairfield, though it did offer me a great amount of resources and flexibility that I didn't see at other schools. So I was given a lot of tools to experiment and teach myself, and also be taught by some amazing instructors. So I've created 2 real films, I'd say. I've got more that are kind of just for me or for my friends, but 2 that I am actually very happy with and have played at festivals around the tri-state area, won a couple of awards. The Quiet Pain, as you mentioned, is my senior thesis film, which just won Best Student Short at the Chain Film Festival in the city. Its most, I'd say, prestigious award. But it's also played at a lot of other great ones, like the Long Island International Film Expo, where it was nominated for the same award. And I also made an 8mm silent short comedy with my friend a couple summers back, which won Best of the festival for the United States Super 8 Film and Digital Video Festival, which is another Rutgers event.
That was a silent film?
Yeah, well, we had a composer friend create, kind of the swing piano and things to have it match the mood, because we are big Buster Keaton fans as well.
Or Chaplin.
Yeah, certainly. And yeah, so if you watch those 2 films together, you will not see much alike. They're very, very different, but equally fun to make, I think.
Tim, was there like one specific incident that ignited your film thing, or it was just a process early on as a young kid, you drifted into it? I know you said it, but I mean, something that really ignited you into film?
Yeah, I would say that I would, first of all, I would say as a Star Wars fan for my entire life, that is probably the most all-consuming influence for everything about me. But I would say the first film I ever watched where I was truly like, oh wow, I really understand how to do things without a whole lot, was Brian De Palma's Carrie from 1976. One of my very, very favorites. I thought that in that, I just noticed movement and kind of not too much production value, but managing to do a lot with camera, and that kind of really triggered something in my head where I started to realize that stuff. And I had just generally been making a move more from video games, which I was obviously into as a child and still am, but it started making that move more over to cinema, where I, could appreciate craft and director touchstones and everything. And so I originally attended Marist pre-college program in 2017 or no, 2017, 2013 for video game design, because that was originally where I was interested, and programming and everything. My brain doesn't work like that. So it didn't work out, but by that point I was already starting to feel less into that and more into movies. So I went back again the next year for movie making, and that was like, yep, this is it. This is where I feel at home. I feel comfortable. I really enjoy the collaborative process and being able to be expressive, and like take as much responsibility as you want for any given project.
It's funny you mentioned Carrie. Long story, but that was part of the foundations of my marriage to my wife 44 years ago. Just about when it had come out, and we actually saw it together early on in our courtship. It's an old term. So anyway, I'm dying. Yes. So I'm like, I love to ask this of filmmakers or of anybody. Just it's a simple question, but some of your favorite films and favorite directors, if you want to.
Certainly, yeah. As many of my favorite films and filmmakers are from Japan. I kind of glossed over it, but I grew up between New Jersey and Japan for several years. From 2005 to 2008, I lived there pretty much the whole time, minus some summers and winters, not even all of them. And, I was 8 years old when I moved there, so it's a very formative age. And growing up in just a suburb, very, very kind of earth-shattering to have my horizons expanded so largely. And I just, totally fell in love with the culture and the aesthetics and really the cinema. I was into Japanese cinema before I even moved there because I loved Godzilla. So as a child, I feel like very few children didn't. So, I already had a love for it, and then, not fully formed. I was very, very young, but I was aware. And then when I moved there, it totally took me over. And going into school, I would say the person I have to thank most is my mentor, Dr. Jiwei Zhao at Fairfield University, who helped take me under her wing to make my second major in Asian studies at Fairfield, which wasn't offered, but I was able to design it with the program and turn the minor into a major. And we did an independent study in Asian cinema where we got to sit down, and I really got the crash course in many major landmarks across East Asian countries, from Japan to China to Korea and a little bit of Thailand. And my absolute favorite filmmaker is Akira Kurosawa. We will definitely touch on that a little bit later. I'd say my favorite film of his is Redbeard, which is not the one that most people go to, but I think is really maybe his most moving picture, that I highly recommend to anybody if they can find it. Other Japanese filmmakers I really admire are Mikio Naruse, who is not very well seen in the States, but is definitely a filmmaker that people should check out. And I would say had the most influence over my thesis than anybody else. I really tried to distill his conception of the Japanese family drama to its core and try to create my own work out of its framework. Although those movies are usually like 2 hours long, and I tried to turn it into 12 minutes, which I couldn't find many that were like that. So I kind of had to, figure it out as I went along. And then Hirokazu Koreeda, I would say, is the greatest living filmmaker at the moment, or at least of a younger generation than, say, Scorsese's generation,
Mhm.
where he just had his control over the human heart is, I think, unparalleled, and I've never been as moved by any films than I am by him. His film Still Walking, I would say, is probably my personal favorite of any film.
Okay.
Uh, so
Okay. So let's talk about now the film that I watched. What completely, and I'm not just saying it because you're sitting over there on the other side of a Zoom. I'm not saying that, but it really, The Quiet Pain kind of blew me away. Heavy stuff for a young guy, and emotional and heavy. And there's so much that I extracted from this. And of course, I kind of knew the end result would be, we'd be doing this. So, I had taken notes, but for people watching, there'll be places where you can find film to watch. It's 12 minutes, but well worth it. Riveting and gripping and hugely emotional. So, talk about the influences that that helped you create this. Where did it come from?
yeah, this was a really tough one to do because I knew for all 4 years of college it ends with you creating your own film, and I just kind of couldn't find it for a really long time. I really couldn't think of what I wanted to do. Uh, yeah, I wound up making this film in Japanese. It actually doubled as my thesis for both majors, which was an
Oh,
incredible feat. I think one of my greatest accomplishments was just pulling that off. But obviously made that incredibly difficult. And I sat down with my cinematographer Nick DeLulo, who produces incredible images and is such a pleasure for me to work with, and I would say is my number one artistic collaborator in the industry. He kind of said to me, "Well, what kind of Japanese film do you want to see?" And I was like, "Yeah, like I suppose, yeah, like I have to think of it differently. Like I'm trying to think of my own outlandish plot or anything." And he was saying like, what do you like about them? And kind of just make your own version of that. And so that's when I started looking at Naruse's stuff more clearly. I'd seen tons of his movies before, but I
mhm.
started really breaking it down into a framework, which was basically female centric. A lot of those films are the shomengeki subgenre. They're considered women's pictures, and followed women usually in a bad marriage or widowed, one or the other. Is those were pretty much the two that he made. Either they were a working woman or a housewife.
Mhm.
But the marriage was never good. There was always a lot of tension, which I think is a distinctly Japanese thing, a nation that is so protective of a family image, one that cares very deeply about family dynasty, and the last name goes first, the family name goes first there. So uh, I think a major source of tension in their films is that family unit going wrong. But unlike, I would say, Western films, they don't usually boil over into extreme emotion or violence. It's always stuff that's very understated, which was what I was much more interested in doing, because up until then, I really had only made comedic movies with friends, and that you have to go big in those. That was what I enjoyed about them. But here was really trying to change my sensibilities for that. And so that was kind of how I created the structure. Was okay, it's usually infidelity starring a woman. And I started thinking about my own mother. Not that there's been any infidelity. My parents are very happily married, which is not what a lot of people would think after they see this movie. Um, but I started thinking like about kind of an invisible sacrifice that my mom has made all sorts of sacrifices. My dad too, but I've specifically for this framework had to think like she's made tons of sacrifices that I will never know about, and I thought that that was an interesting angle to take an add to this specific framework. And yeah, just kind of worked from there. It took a long time to write, a lot of drafts. And eventually, really, I just had to shoot it because I wrote it for about a year.
Wow.
And, you know,
Wow.
the clock is ticking. I have to do it to graduate. So I started writing it in, I would say, January of 2018, or even maybe December
Wow.
2017.
Okay.
And then shot it at the end of the year in 2018, and then finished it in April 2019. Although I kept tweaking it a little bit for the summer before I started submitting it to festivals.
Could you remind folks where they can see The Quiet Pain?
Yeah, so I just finally made it public on Vimeo after 2 years,
Okay.
basically, because the festival process takes a long time, and with COVID, it really made it take even longer, and it was very unfortunate because I didn't get to meet a whole lot of people, which was the point, was to, you know, have it be a good networking opportunity. But on the other hand, I do get to do this now, and reach more people actually with virtual festivals, which is interesting. I just don't get to reach them in person. But it is on my Vimeo, which is vimeo.com/Timothy AMATULLI.
Okay.
So it can be found there. I think the link will be in the description. Also through my website, timothyAMATULLI.com, you can get links directly to it.
Okay. Hey, and it's 12 minutes, and it's so well worth to see the work of a young filmmaker starting out. And so definitely well worth it, and to the point where I'd probably watch it again, because you know, you pick up, the second time I watched it, even though it was back to back, you pick up a few things with her, and I'll leave it at that. And so before we continue, I had before we went on air, I'd mentioned I'd like to ask just one cerebral question, and I think I know the answer, but I'm not that smart. But anyway, so here's an off-topic question for you. Excluding family or friends, somebody living or dead you'd like to spend the day with. And you may come up with a couple.
I think that we're thinking of the same answer, which is probably Kurosawa.
Yeah, I laughed.
Yeah.
I laughed.
It's definitely an easy answer for me, but I don't think you get any better than him. And I mean, with all of my research that I've done with him, I really do feel like I've met him. Reading his autobiography, reading several books dedicated to studying him, watching his entire filmography, which was one of my quarantine activities.
Which we're going to talk about. That was my next question. By the way, when I was your age, a long time ago, and I don't remember the context with the course, but whatever course it was, I don't remember. But I saw Rashomon and had to write a report on that. So
yeah, not the easiest paper to write.
Probably not. I don't. I mean, it's a long time ago. So, but anyway, so I'm probably one of the few, I think, few people in my generation who really knows a lot about Kurosawa. I don't know a lot, but I've seen his work. But anyway, you alluded to this, Tim, and I'm always curious what your generation did during the quarantine. Anything special?
Yeah, so after I graduated, I spent my time freelancing and working on different sets and like films, TV shows, shorts, all that. And my time with that kind of got cut off because the industry and the rest of the world shut down. But that gave me time to kind of reassess myself and figure out what I want to do, because I really did miss doing analytical work. And ultimately the quarantine gave me a lot of time to work on my applications to go back to grad school.
Right.
So because of that, I'm now able to, go to Columbia in the fall,
Right.
which is amazing.
Right.
I started out though, before making that move, I reached out to this one Asian cinema website, filmedinether.com, which I have found through YouTube because they make amazing video essays, and they also publish a lot of articles and film reviews. And I reached out to them because they welcome contributors, and so I started writing for them. I have a piece on Kurosawa's Kagemusha, which is another one of my personal favorites of his. I think an underseen epic, and wrote a couple different reviews for some Asian film festivals on films from China and Bhutan and all over. And I have a piece on Naruse currently in editing, which will hopefully be published soon. And then some more ideas in the pipeline that
Okay.
I, can work on as I have time. And once I was, really getting back into that, I was like, yeah, I really do like doing this. I felt like working as just a crew guy, I wasn't really using my brain enough. And yeah, like I loved the work, but I didn't love it. The work didn't love me, I'll say.
Okay.
I loved doing it, but I didn't love doing it full time or anything. And I love doing it with friends, and it's not as much fun when it's with new strangers all the time. And so it was a welcome change. And after I finished that, I also started doing a Kurosawa podcast with my friend Chris.
Yeah. Could you talk about that? I mean, that to me is so removed from everyday life to do a podcast on Kurosawa. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, definitely. So it's called Sanshiro's Boys, which is named after Sanshiro Sugata, the debut feature of Kurosawa. We did 35 episodes.
Wow.
Once a week.
Wow.
It took basically a year because we did a lot before we ever published, because we wanted to really make sure we were committed, because I will never start a project and not finish it. That is not in my wheelhouse. So I considered it basically another part of my grad school application, was just really, really get back into analyzing a lot of different films, learning director styles. I knew a lot about him. I'd seen most of his films already, but to watch a director's oeuvre in chronological order is absolutely the best way that you could ever experience an artist. And I think you could develop a very personal connection with them as a person rather than just as a product, like seeing each film not in isolation, but in context of someone learning, especially starting in the 30s or starting in the 40s, and then, finishing in the 90s, covering an immense amount of time where film technology and sensibilities changed wildly. And my friend had only seen Rashomon. I was the only one he had seen because I think he had seen it. No, not for school. I think he just had watched it. But he knew nothing, and I knew a lot and was reading along with analytical text and stuff. So we were doing, a loose, like fun, but also analytical discussion of each film, because some of them are very fun. Almost all of them are very good. And there's a lot to mine in a lot of these in terms of themes and technique. And yeah, it was a very heavily edited show, which, because I tried my best to make sure everything was correct. And every once in a while, something slips through the cracks that I feel bad about. But just kind of talking off the cuff, sometimes it gets lost. But did my best to really make sure that everything we were saying was right, and got the message across and kind of gave someone a companion, because some of these films, there isn't much about them written or recorded about in terms of reviews. And those are actually the episodes that tend to get more hits, because I think just people don't have anywhere else to turn.
Wow.
So and we got a lot of really good feedback from fans that found the show and just appreciated the work that had been put into it. And that felt amazing. And ultimately, at the end of the day, I said, this is for me. If anyone else enjoys that, that's a bonus. But this is really for me to get a good project done and make use of my time while I'm stuck at home, and learn. And I feel like I learned so much, and um, I have, no regrets about taking on the project, even though there were definitely points where I wish I hadn't cursed myself with such a difficult effort, because getting a show out a week when some of the episodes are
Oh,
hour 20, like
it's
the
hard.
Rashomon episode was almost as long as Rashomon
Wow.
because there's so much to discuss.
Wow.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
it's
but
funny.
it was a lot of fun.
What you just said, when I was in college, we used review books all the time, you know, and instead of reading I'll never forget, whatever I had to read for an English course when I was in college, whatever I had to read, I got the review book, which was actually longer than the book. That's what you just said.
Yeah,
It's kind of funny. And there's this is off topic. I'm fumbling around for something. I want to find it. So this isn't a Japanese film, but I knew I'd be interviewing you. And who knows how this thing up here works and the firing mechanisms. But 2 nights ago, I watched, it's not a Japanese film, but it takes place in Japan. It's called Sayonara. Did you ever hear of it?
I've not seen that one. No.
Well, it's Marlon Brando, and you should watch it. It won, I think it won Best Picture in 1958. It was directed by Joshua Logan, and I've seen it before, and it's a great story, and it takes place in 1951 Japan, right after the war. And Brando plays an Air Force pilot who's very successful, and he meets a Japanese girl. By the way, she, the woman that he's with, this is so off topic, but the woman that he's with in that movie's made in the early 50s, she's still living in New York somewhere. She's way into her 90s. Miko Taka, I think is her name. But it's an interesting, but the point I wanted to make, two things. It's Japan, and it also pointed out just how great Marlon Brando was. And there are things that hang around Brando's image. When he won the Academy Award for The Godfather, he sent a Native American to get the award. It was very controversial. But the truth of the matter is he was way ahead of his time, quite an actor. Anyway, I'm sorry I drifted off. Maybe sometimes I drift off when I have an audience and somebody in the business. So you're gonna be at Columbia in the fall. I think that's great. And looking beyond, as we wind this, looking beyond, you want to be a filmmaker.
At the end of the day, yeah. But I kind of, the last couple of years taught me, like, I think I want to do it more for myself rather than, I don't know how to be like a professional director in terms of like being one of the people that gets handed projects and stuff. I hope that happens. I don't know. I'm not entirely sure how to make it happen. But I really want to keep making my own projects at my own pace, and then just, take them to festivals and meet people and see where, life spirals to. At the end of the day, I would like to keep writing. Definitely is what I find is the work that I find most enjoyable. I said to someone, I said I think I would know I'd made it if I got a essay published in a DVD booklet. Would be would be what told me that I made it, because I love, releases from like Criterion where they have all these analytical essays included, and it just feels very authoritative and professional, and I find all of that stuff wonderful. So that's kind of where I'd like to go, and more into a teaching direction. I'd
Okay.
like to share what I love with others. And that was really another impetus for the podcast. It was kind of like I was teaching a class to an audience of one at first, and then an audience of however many people listen to it after. But I do really enjoy sharing the things that I love. And I think that's ultimately what being a filmmaker is that you're, influenced by what you're influenced by. And then you're kind of sharing that directly or indirectly with your audiences. And so in my case, I've now shared my film with you. And by doing so, I've shared kind of the essence that I've at least tried to capture of these other filmmakers that I love, that hopefully maybe you would go check out afterwards.
Well, you know
Because
what?
I highly recommend them.
Guess what? I will.
Excellent.
I will. I'm not just saying this because I'm talking to you, but it's been a long time since I saw Rashomon, and your great enthusiasm for Kurosawa has sparked me. I mean, I marvel. I've said this to you. I marvel at filmmakers and storytellers and the art and the craft way beyond my comprehension and way beyond. And that's why I was so intrigued to spend some time with you and follow up on Keith's suggestion, because it is such a gift to do that, what you do. And you're at the beginning of a wonderful journey. And life's kind of funny. Life's really funny. You kind of throw things up on a wall, and you never really kind of know. I mean, 10 years ago, I published a novel and became a journalist and a broadcaster and a novelist, and here I am talking to you. And on top of that, I taught a course 2 years ago at Rutgers, all part of giving back and learning and experiencing and absorbing. If you're in the game, if you're doing it, things will happen. And you're doing it, and having met you and absorbed, it'll be kind of neat for me to watch you. And of course, we'll stay in touch. And as we wind down this time together, I really thank you, Tim, for your time. I thank you for introducing me to the Quiet Pain and this time, and I really truly got a kick out of your generation and kind of watching, which I will be doing. I have a funny sense of loyalty, and I'll say it on air. This channel will keep on evolving, and I have no idea when I started this in September it would be growing like this. And this is my 71st interview, and I mean, I just never knew. So it's evolving, which is leading me to say, hey, come back.
Yeah.
You have a project, an idea, and you want a platform, you want a panel, hey, whatever, I'm here.
Yeah, no, certainly after whatever my next film is, I have some stuff written. But obviously making a film right now has not been easy. And whatever my next project winds up being, you'll be the first to know.
Please do. And I'm also a bit of a groupie. I'm close to the bunch of independent filmmakers here in Jersey, and from time to time they've invited me to the set, where I just love to sit and watch. So invite me to the set. I love to sit and watch. But anyway, thank you so much for this. I wish you so much good things. And it's so exciting, Columbia, great school. Please do come back.
I hope so.
And I'll let you know about Kurosawa.
Yeah, please. Yeah. Thank you for having me. And I really appreciate all you do. And thanks to Keith as well for putting us together. And it's funny, we kind of alluded to his films a little bit, but we really connected because we kind of made the same film a little bit.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah.
And I didn't mention that. It's funny, when I watched The Quiet Pain, what resonated with me was it reminded me of Be Home Soon, which was such a wonderful short film that Keith did
Yeah, I really enjoyed it.
on the same subject matter, basically.
Yeah, and I think that's what's fun about it, is that it's similar, but two
But
different
different.
people wind up creating very different
Very, very different.
works. But I definitely think it was a good starting point for our relationship together, with
Yeah.
just saying like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, like I guess, you know, crying in the shower works for everybody. So
Great stuff, really. His film, Be Home Soon, I'm looking at the little poster from sitting over there. I look at it all the time. And it's funny, I don't critique and review. I think I mentioned that to you. I'm not a,
yeah,
I don't like to review things because I like positivity. And then, and so I always review, when I do review things, I always put a positive slant on it. And in the real world, that's not what people want, but that's what they get from me. But with Keith, it was really easy. And same thing with The Quiet Pain. If I did a review, it's really positive stuff. And I would put myself up with quite a bit of film reviewers in being able to, you know, digest and put down what needs to be put down. I don't know. I'm kind of rambling, but anyway, this was great. Have a wonderful holiday weekend, and you and I will be in touch. Thank you. Thank you, Tim.
awesome. Thank you.